Hey everyone! Before we get into my chat with legendary songwriter and producer Desmond Child, I want to tell you about the wonderful world of Hot Dog Club, which you can join now by heading over to patreon.com/CraigandFriends. You have a few reward tiers to choose from, with the $5 option netting you the full-length bonus episodes, the $7 option getting you the bonus episodes plus all of the listener questions episodes, which time to time feature very special guests such as Bible Girl, Jasmine Masters, Alaska, Willem, John Grant, Jake Shears, the list goes on. But the $10 option is the best option, and why is that? Well, because you get all the bonus episodes, all the listener questions episodes, and you also get Movie Club. And the hot new Movie Club that's coming out shortly features Alaska Thunderfuck and I talking all things Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, a cult classic that was far ahead of its time. Once you do join Hot Dog Club, the almost painfully swollen archive, well, it's instantly unlocked, and you can dive into the Olympic-sized pool of content and get soaking wet with entertainment. By doing so, you help support this show. So essentially, only good comes from joining Hot Dog Club, which means that you should consider it your civic duty. Once again, that's patreon.com/CraigandFriends.
I had a song on Times Square.
That night was not, right?
Yeah.
Well, and right over there I have your first two albums.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I pull them out, but you know what they look like.
I see the yellow. I see the little yellow coming over there.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big fan of your music.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Our Love is Insane is one of my favorites of your solo stuff. I really wanted to go see you at 54 Below at Feinstein's, but I wasn't in New York at that time. When I reached out to you, I was hoping that you were going to be in New York when I was, but you live in Nashville, right?
I do.
Mm-hmm. When did you move there?
Well, we were living in Miami. I was going to Nashville to write. Mm-hmm. And so I decided that instead of staying in a hotel, I had to stay in a log cabin. Mm-hmm. So first we rented one, mm-hmm. and then we built one. And then that little cabin, it sort of looks like Cracker Barrel. Uh-huh. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
My husband and I, we had moved to New York, and then we moved back to Nashville. We moved into the shack.
Okay.
And it was like the Waltons. I mean,
everyone calling out goodnight at the end of the show.
Pretty much, the boys slept in the loft over the kitchen.
Yeah.
And we had one bedroom. Okay. And so right before they went to high school, we decided to add bedrooms. Mm-hmm. So we did that and added a pool, and then we added a new master bedroom, and before we knew it, we were in debt again. But and like now they're going to go off to college, so it was only good for we should have just stayed at a hotel.
Yeah, right. And maybe let them have the cabin, you go to the hotel, or vice versa. Switch out on weekends.
It would have been way cheaper.
Is your love insane, or do you give love a bad name? Either way, on this episode of Whimsically Volatile, I am pleased and thrilled to present a singer, a songwriter, a one-time cult member, a father, a husband, and my guest, Mr. Desmond Child. Welcome, Desmond.
Welcome. Welcome to me. Yes.
And welcome to Whimsically Volatile. I'm so glad we could make this work.
Is this like Austin Powers' living room? What's with the shag rug and furry pillows?
Yeah, another friend of mine started bringing up the Austin Powers thing. Yeah.
It's very comfortable.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, I like this color palette of the throw pillows. I'm trying to work in more of that palette with the gray and black.
It works. I
think
it really works.
You. I appreciate that.
Mauve, it's called.
Mauve. Because I was calling it Dusty Rose.
There's a fine line between mauve and dusty rose.
Yeah, that's really true, isn't it?
You have to be gay to know the difference.
And speaking of being gay, I wanted to ask you, because I was learning more about your family history and about how your father thought that gay men didn't have enough testosterone to father a child.
That's right. He thought we were eunuchs. He was a Hungarian with very thick accent. And what, you can have babies? He thought I was crazy when I said I was having a child and it was biologically mine, and that they would have Hungarian blood. Mm-hmm. He was in shock. He thought we were infertile, that all gay people are infertile.
What was it like when they found out, or you told them rather, that you were gay?
Well, my mother was happy about it because she was always a huge fag hag. Okay. I mean, we always had gay guys around the house. She even dated a gay guy. She was a songwriter, so she thought he could help her with her demos. Uh-huh. So
did it work out? Did the demos get better?
She was his beard, in other words.
Sure. So everyone, yeah.
And yeah, she got great demos out of it. But my dad, I think he was like, he didn't show at all any kind of displeasure or unhappiness, but I know he was a bit homophobic, you know, being Hungarian and all. But what was he going to do? I mean, I was already 18 when I found out he was my father, so he took me under his wing and he put me through college and all of that. He really, you know, like gave me kind of like a lot of the love and attention that I never got as a child. So that was helpful, more than helpful. It made me who I am.
Sure.
So he was always very accepting.
Now, when you say that that's when you found out he was your father, could you explain that a little bit?
My mom had left Cuba with an American geologist who had British parents. He was about 16 years older than her, and she was already thinking she was a spinster at age 23. Also because she was a bit tall and blonde, and she didn't look at all Latina. So he married her and took her to the jungles of Venezuela, where she realized that she was very unhappy. She had no idea what she was stepping into.
Sure.
And she had to live with his mother, who was like a very strict British, you know, kind of like Maggie Smith.
Sure.
Who didn't like her and didn't speak Spanish, and it was terrible. Oof. So on Wednesdays, she would go to a matinee across this big lake called Maracaibo in Venezuela. She would go see an American movie, and she walked into the movie theater, and it was completely empty. She sat down, and then a man came behind her and from behind and then sat next to her and just stared at her the whole time. And he was a very handsome, dashing Hungarian immigrant.
Yeah.
Looked like Errol Flynn. That's when they started up. And before she knew it, she was pregnant. And then she didn't come back. And he waited for her week after week, hoping she would come back. And she didn't. And then he went over to the other side, and they had moved away.
Oh, yeah.
So he went to Cuba, and from little things that she had said, like clues, he tracked down her sister and started writing her letters, and her sister would put them inside the letters. So
because her sister knew that this was the real.
Yeah, so they met in Miami Beach when I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
I met, 6 months old. And then he begged her to leave with him, and then she went back to her husband, and she couldn't do it because she was afraid of what her family would think.
Oh, really? Wow.
So, you know, that kind of set the course of my life in a whole other direction.
Yeah, sure. And what was growing up like?
It was bad because eventually she divorced that man, and we went to live in Miami in poverty, and we lived in the projects of Liberty City. I don't know if you remember a movie called Moonlight.
Sure.
The one that took the Oscar instead of La La Land.
Yeah, when they got around to the right answer.
Exactly. Yeah. And those projects was where I grew up.
Yeah.
And in fact, the apartment that they filmed it in was exactly like the one we lived in, like exact. And it was kind of creepy and brought up a lot of memories that weren't good. It was a very terrible time, but we lived there about 12 years. And I started going to local elementary school, and then I went to Edison Junior High School, and it was very rough. Very rough, and there was no teaching happening there.
Okay.
People were just like fighting, and the teachers were just like jail keepers.
Sure, yeah.
So I lied about my address, and I started going to Nautilus Junior High School on Miami Beach, where all the rich kids lived.
Okay, yeah.
So it took me 3 buses to get there every day, so I had to leave super extra early, and it took me forever to get home. But it made a huge difference.
Yeah.
One of my classmates was Mickey Rourke.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he became my protector.
That's a good one to have if you're going to have a protector, right?
And so there was this bully, and he always used to say, "I'm going to kick your ass after school. I'm going to kill you." One day, Mickey came up to him and just grabbed him by the shirt, and he went halfway up a wall. And he said, "You know, you ever come near him again, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kick your ass, and you'll never be able to come back to school again." And the guy started leaving me alone.
It's amazing how cowardly bullies really are under the surface.
I found out much later, when I was in college, that the poor guy, during that period of time, his mother was dying of cancer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So he was taking it out on me.
Right.
And then I kind of forgave him a little bit.
Sure. That's a good thing to have happen when you can realize that these people might be in pain too.
Yeah, that was kind of a tough time in my life. Luckily, during those days, the whole 60s exploded.
Yeah.
And all of my friends were going to rock concerts and overnight ones, like Woodstocky kind of ones that they had in Florida. You'd go 3 days, and I got to see Janis Joplin and the Rolling Stones and Jimi Hendrix burn a guitar. And, you know, all of those things. I was there. I saw them. And that's what gave me kind of like that feeling like, gosh, you know, we're so poor, and I probably, who knows what, I'd end up like a waiter or a cook or something, like my uncles and aunts. And I just said, no, you know what? I'm going to be a rock star.
Yeah.
I think that's the better way to go.
Yeah.
And I figured out how to do it.
How did you start figuring out how to do that? When did you start playing music?
Well, my mother was a songwriter, so there was always a song being written. I didn't know people didn't write songs. I thought that's the way human beings express themselves.
Right.
There'd always be a little piano, and we had a little Wurlitzer piano that was terribly out of tune. But I started writing my first songs on it. Then I met a girl on the lawn at Miami Beach High, and she was playing acoustic guitar, and she kind of had Yoko Ono hair and little granny glasses and stuff. And I made friends with her, and her name was Deborah Wallstein. Debbie Wall, that's what they called her. We just bonded, and we started writing songs together. We decided we'd be a duo. We loved the name Night Child. Yeah. So then she became Virgil Knight, and I became Desmond Child.
Right. And your original name is?
John Charles Barrett. That was the name of the American geologist. So I was named after him.
So you changed your name to Desmond Child?
Yes, because I wanted it to sound like Elton John.
It's a great name. It's one of my favorite stage names. There's really no other Desmond that I know of in rock.
No.
Just like there's only one Elton, like you said.
Right.
I mean, there was Elton Motello, but that doesn't really count. He was like, he had a record. I think he had one album out or something.
But it's funny, sometimes people come up to me and they say, my name's Desmond. My parents named me after you. It's like, what? I'm so sorry. Really?
So you formed Night Child, and
we dropped out of 11th grade and drove all the way up to Montreal, then back through Boston. There was a folk club called Sword and Stone, and so we tried to play there, and we didn't get picked. So we drove down to Woodstock, New York, where there was a folk scene. And this is the leftovers from the Woodstock Festival. Just like 2 years after. But Dylan was there, the band was there, Van Morrison, Todd Rundgren was up at Bearsville making an album called Something Anything.
Oh, right.
And I befriended the head engineer there, Nick Jameson, and he came from a group called the American Dream Machine. And so he was very handsome. He had a beautiful girlfriend and everything. And he just, thought we were cute. I mean, we were 17. Yeah. So he let me be like the coffee boy. Todd was never nice to me. And
I've read many things that was sort of his thing back then, right?
Well, he was super mean. Yeah. And, he had like a sign on his door, like, do not enter and all this kind of stuff. But, being me, I would go and stand in the airlock and be able to hear the music. Oh, yeah. And as soon as the music stopped, I'd run out and run to the right down the hall. And then he'd come out and go to the left where the bathrooms and all that were. Okay. And so then he'd go back in. And then as soon as I heard the music again, I'd go and stand in the airlock. And I heard all those songs, that really made such a deep influence on me. Yeah. And then, he always just, was mean, just like condescending, sarcastic. And his music was so soulful and the opposite of the way he behaved.
Yeah, it's funny, the contrast there.
So many years later, remember he produced Bat Outta Hell 1 and then Jim Steinman took over and did Bat Outta Hell 2. Right. But Jim Steinman and Meatloaf had a falling out, so I stepped in and produced Bat Outta Hell 3.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So, Meatloaf insisted on bringing Todd back because he had sung backgrounds on Bat Outta Hell 2. Yeah. Because it was sort of his sound, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think Steinman brought him in on Bonnie Tyler's record to Holding Out for a Hero.
Holding Out for a Hero, that was Todd Rundgren.
Like, the backgrounds were. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So they insisted on bringing Todd, but when he saw me, it was like, there's the coffee boy.
Really? He still had that thing?
Oh my God, he was so disrespectful.
You got to be kidding me. All this time
terrible.
later. Oh, that's so disappointing.
He was so mean to me.
It's such a
and
shame.
I was the producer, so now I had to oversee the vocals, and I couldn't tell him anything. He was a know-it-all. and then I had a song that I had written with Marty Fredrickson, and we had cut a gorgeous track called If God Could Talk. Mm-hmm. And so, we wanted to put some harmonies, that Toddish kind of sound on it.
Yeah.
He just started giving me shit. And he started saying, well, everybody knows that God can talk. It's if God would talk, not could talk. If he would, not if he could.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's like, Todd, it's coming from a coined phrase. If these walls could talk,
right?
You're not going to get that if God would talk.
Like he's being just sort of insolent and stubborn and doesn't want to talk.
No, everybody knows. I said, you know what? God hasn't said a peep since that burning bush. Show me where he's talked.
Yeah,
since the burning bush. And that was a very long time ago. I think he might have forgotten how to talk. This is all filmed, right? Because Meatloaf had the whole process filmed.
Sure, yeah.
And oh my God, it was terrible.
What was his response to that? Did he just stop that conversation, or did he?
He left in a huff or something. He was just insolent. And the other night, Rick Knowles invited me to the Todd Rundgren concert, and I said, I would not go see Todd Rundgren if you paid me $5 million. Well, maybe if you paid me $5 million, I'd go. But there's no way. He said, but his music, and I said, I love his music. He's like a genius.
Yeah.
He's influenced me so much.
Right.
But I'm not going to go there and see him up on stage for like 2 hours. No way.
Yeah.
So
you've had your fill of Todd in person.
Yes, exactly. But honestly, a deep low bow to him for the music that he's created. Yeah. I mean, he's truly a genius and
influenced the culture so greatly, because without him, there would not be Bat Out of Hell. He's the only one who believed in it. Right. And so many other things too.
If God would talk.
Well, if God would talk, it'd make things a lot easier, right? But if God could talk is the point. That's, yeah.
God would talk. I think the whole political landscape would be very different right now.
I think so. Yeah, I think you might have a few things to say about
might be a few
people.
Changes.
Yeah, just a couple little things. You'd be like, you guys like me? Listen, let me tell you something. You're after the wrong candidate. You're out on the wrong horse here. You're in Woodstock, and how long is it until you move to New York City?
Well, we got David Shaw, who was the drummer in Van Morrison's band, to record 3 songs with us. Mm-hmm. And when those demos were finished, I mean, we even got this girl to play violin on it that had been Jack Benny's little girl on TV, that little foil, right?
Sure.
I don't know what happened to her. If she's out there,
if she's listening to this, yeah.
Find me. And she played on it. Everybody played for free because we were poor as hell. And Virgil and I, we were picking apples in Poughkeepsie. I mean, it was terrible. It was one of the worst jobs. Yeah. I mean, I could barely do it. And then they relegated us to the, production line where the apples would go by and you'd like quickly pick out the bad ones. It was like I Love Lucy and the Chocolate Factory.
Right.
But that's what kept us going. And my car didn't have heat. Mm-hmm. And the back windshield was also corroded and fell off. Right around that time, I turned 18 and I went to see Seymour Stein.
Oh, yeah, the head of Sire Records.
Right, and he had just started his company. Mm-hmm. This is 1971, November of 1971, and we went and played our demo. He's very sweet and all that. Of course, we weren't ready for prime time, and so that's when my father came to New York and told me he was my father.
Wow.
And said, okay, here you go. He's $250. Just drive back to Miami and we'll get you back in school. And I did everything he said. Mm-hmm. And when we were in Miami, we heard that there was going to be a big music business convention, the NARM convention. Mm-hmm. And we decided to go and impersonate John and Yoko to get in.
Yeah.
So we dressed like John and Yoko and kept our heads down, and she wore these big Jackie O glasses and the black hair and black suit, and I was all in white with the beard and the split hair on the side, and we just kept our heads down, and everyone would say, John and Yoko, it's John and Yoko. And so nobody stopped us. So we just walked right in, and there was a table right near the front and had 2 empty seats, and it was a table away from our real target was Clive Davis.
Oh, sure.
Because he was the president of Columbia Records, and he had signed Laura Nyro, who was, our ultimate, artist.
And one of your sons is named after her, right?
Yes, Nyro, Nyro. At the end of the show, we had dinner. You saw the show.
Yeah.
Everybody stood up. We stood up, and Clive Davis stood up. We turned to him, and he looked at us and started laughing because I think he thought we were John and Yoko as well.
Sure,
and
yeah.
he thought, oh, well, there's, John and Yoko.
Of course they're here. And,
exactly. And he thought it was funny, and he took our demo. He sent us a letter, a really nice handwritten letter saying, it's not really for me and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was terrible. I have to admit, it was,
You have to, when you're at that stage, not see that it's bad because you have to keep being propelled forward, right?
Right. So we had made a folder, and we did pictures with an amazing photographer. We were good at packaging.
Yeah.
And our name, Night Child, was fantastic.
Yeah.
I think I might go back to Night Child.
Why not? Yeah. It's good to have a couple different brands these days.
I think so. 40 years later, in 2012, Clive Davis honors me with the Clive Davis Legend in Songwriting Award.
Yeah.
And I was the 4th recipient, and he hands it to me. And it's like, Jesus, you hand him a demo. Then 40 years later, he hands you a prize. What do you think about that?
That's pretty good. That's what you got to do with Clive Davis. It's a 40-year thing, but you do get
it's a 40-year trek.
Yeah. It's interesting in those 2 stories about Clive Davis and Todd Rundgren. Clive was really nice when you first met him, and he had no reason to be other than he was just being nice. And Todd really had no reason to be so mean other than he was not really that well adjusted, seemingly. Have you found that people's true nature holds true throughout the years in the business that you're in?
I don't really see that people really change who they are.
Yeah.
I think some people could have made a lot of mistakes and maybe had insecurities that they overcame and became better, nicer people. But, I have to say that one of the nicest people I've ever met, and I've never heard different from anybody else, is Alice Cooper. I mean, the sweetest, nicest, most giving, nurturing, funny person I've ever met.
Yeah.
And I loved working with him. We wrote an album together called Trash and had a hit called Poison. It was
a big comeback album. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. Yeah.
Well, first of all, we sold close to 4.5 million records, and that's more than any of the other albums he had ever made.
Right.
Or ever since. And, I think, I delivered for him.
Yeah, you definitely did.
Last year, I got honored with the ASCAP Founders Award. And they surprised me and had Alice Cooper open my sequence singing Poison.
That's great.
I had absolutely no clue that he was even there.
Yeah.
Then Paul Stanley introduced me.
Now, Paul Stanley plays a large role in your career as a songwriter, right?
Absolutely. There was a young band from New Jersey that had been struggling with their second album and opened for Kiss in Europe, and their name was Bon Jovi. And Paul, who's kind of very nurturing himself and almost like a professor or something, said, you should write with Desmond.
Yeah.
And he gave him my number, and I went over to New Jersey, and I went to Richie Sambora's family home where he grew up. He was still living with his parents.
Yeah.
And I walk in, a little wooden house in a cul-de-sac, and behind was a ginormous marsh, a gray, foreboding marsh that went on as far as the eye could see. And at the very end of it was this giant oil refinery. It looked like Emerald City. It's like the most toxic place to live ever.
Yeah.
And I walk in, and Richie's there, and I walk past, his bedroom, which was on the way to the kitchen on the left, and I look in, and there was a Farrah Fawcett poster, in the red bathing suit.
Oh, sure.
Kiss posters,
Yeah.
Eric Clapton,
Mm-hmm.
Led Zeppelin, full of pictures and posters. It looks like typical teenage boy's room.
Sure.
I walk into the kitchen and John Bon Jovi's on the wall phone, the avocado green wall phone, and he kind of looks up and, kind of like looks at me sideways and kind of nods and, goes on talking, I'm sure, to his manager at the time, Doc McGee,
Right.
kind of plotting and planning and all this. So then Richie leads me all the way down to the basement, and it was like, that was like Silence of the Lambs. And down there was this old Formica table that had been retired down there, and they had put a little keyboard on it, and there was some amps on buzzing, and you could see some transoms, but they were like full of mud, like you couldn't really see out.
Yeah.
And that's where the laundry was, and clothes everywhere. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
He kind of left me down there, and then came down with John, and then we started. I came prepared with a title in my back pocket.
Titles are big with you, right?
That's right. And I like titles that have irony. So I had come up with You Give Love a Bad Name. And I actually had it written on a little piece of paper in my back pocket. And I presented it, and John's face lit up, and I got my first view of the $1 million smile. Well, I should say $1 billion smile.
Sure, right. Actually, yeah.
By now. He lit up, and, right away, he had a song on his previous album called Shot Through the Heart. And so he's not one to waste a good hook.
Right.
So he just immediately said, shot through the heart, and you to blame, because, darling, you give love a bad name. And we said, you give love a bad name together.
Yeah.
And that was our first, high five and, triple fist bump. And I started playing this kind of bass line on the keyboard that was kind of a combination of These Dreams Are Made of This by the Eurythmics.
Yeah, yeah.
And Billie Jean. Because Billie Jean is like dun 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 dun. The Eurythmics one is very similar also.
Yeah.
And so, but I came up with a different little variation. Dun 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 dun. I mean, almost exactly the same. And so Richie was looking at me. He said, man, that's like, Michael Jackson or something. I said, play it on guitar. And play it like chugs. Mute it and play it like chugs. So he did it. Chung, 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 chung. And John's face lit up, and it was like magic.
Yeah.
And music history was made right there in that second.
And you went on to write the 20, 30 songs with Bon Jovi. Is that close to accurate? Or?
Well, who's counting?
More than two?
Yeah. Well, there was two that really counted.
Yeah.
And
some of the other ones, Bad Medicine, right?
Yes, and Living on a Prayer.
Yeah, that one that people might have heard of, I think.
Right. And I had like 4 songs on Slippery When Wet.
Yeah.
And we wrote extra songs. Like there was a song we wrote called We All Sleep Alone. And John just thought it was too kind of feminine, kind of like slow or kind of sensitive.
Sure.
And I mean, we had to beg him to cut Living on a Prayer.
Really?
Because that wasn't his vision. He wanted to be a real rocker.
Okay, sure.
So that song was telling a kind of sentimental story about this couple and all this kind of stuff. And literally, Richie and I got on our hands and knees, on the floor, and like just pleading, please cut it. At least let's cut it. Let's hear it.
Right.
And, the minute they did, just...
Everyone knew that.
Right.
And you're actually sort of the Tommy, right, in the song?
Yeah, because, I mean, I'm sure that Richie brought his story to the table. John brought his story to the table. My story was, I was thinking back on the time that I lived with Maria. And Maria Vidal.
So a lot of listeners might know the Body Rock theme, which is a good example of one of her solo singles, and a member of Rouge.
That's right. Maria and I lived in this tiny little apartment. I was writing songs, and she was working as a waitress at a place called Once Upon a Stove. She was a singing waitress. And all the waiters and waitresses had fake stage names when they worked there, because they present them, do like kind of like funny, half funny. And her stage name was Gina Velvet. So people started calling her Gina. That's where Gina came from. And when I first suggested it, I said Johnny and Gina because I love alliteration. And then John said, I can't sing Johnny. That's my name. Oh, right. And I said, okay, Tommy, which was a sound alike.
Yeah.
And that's how Tommy and Gina were born.
Yeah. Another bit of that song, which is very personal to you, is it doesn't make a difference if we make it or not, right?
At the time, I was living in a New Age commune, and the leader of it, who was kind of very, it was a cult.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize it, because I had been in all kinds of guru, religions and all this kind of stuff. And this one was very different. It was kind of, I don't know, more like a mind control thing, or more about being in the truth, telling the truth. And then there was these like confrontations, It was called Aquanasa, which was some kind of Native American name for home. And the leader was from Texas, and he was our voice teacher. He was only like 2 or 3 years older than us, but he seemed like he was, it's like we were following Jared Leto or something. No joke.
Yeah.
The guy had a look, he was like the reincarnation of Christ.
Sure.
These blue eyes that could look right through you. And he would always say, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference. Truth is what it is. It doesn't make a difference. You can't change what the truth is. And so that it doesn't make a difference if we make it or not. Kind of like you surrender to truth, right?
Sure.
His philosophy made it into that song. Maybe that was the reason ultimately that I joined that cult, just to get that line.
Sure. Well, because you have to look at experiences like that too to see what the positives are that come out of it. Because you could look back at it and regret it, and I don't know, maybe you do.
One of the things about that time was a lot of my friends were dying of AIDS, and it was terrible Holocaust that happened to the GLBT community. And by joining this small group, really it was only about 15 people, we were creating our own kind of hopeful future.
Yeah.
And we were out of the city.
Okay.
It was kind of like a relief. Most of the guys in the group were gay anyway, and I'm not sure about the girls that were there, but we weren't having relationships with each other because that was kind of forbidden.
Okay.
Because coupling was not, considered in truth.
Oh, I see. It's also easier for people to control people when they do that, right?
Because you don't have two teaming up against the one. So he had a way of, making you feel fantastic, and then a few days later you were just, dog meat again.
Sure.
And the up and down wanting to please him, went over. I was there 4 years.
It's a long time for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it was very traumatic. When I went to Russia with a group of songwriters in a program called Music Speaks Louder Than Words, the fall of 1988. I went there and saw a whole society that was living like how I was.
Which was how? What were the conditions like?
Well, I mean, we lived in a beautiful home and everything. I had a tiny captain's bed with 2 drawers, and that's where all my belongings were.
Wow.
And then just a little slice of the closet for my dress shirts.
Yeah.
And everything was at minimum. We lived a Spartan life. Everything was very controlled, like how you speak, how you look, what you think. And then I saw a whole society that was like that.
Yeah.
Very rigid.
Sure.
And it broke the spell. And I realized that's not who I am.
Right.
It's like, this is suppressing my spirit.
Yeah.
Not making me become more spiritual.
Right.
I'm becoming less spiritual. I'm becoming less myself.
Right.
I'm just a robot just wanting to fit in.
Yeah.
Wanting family.
Sure.
And that's really what was missing from my life, because I had left home so early and I didn't really have a great childhood and all that. And so I just snapped out of it. And I went back and, I said, I need some time away and all that. And he tore me to shreds, saying I was the most selfish person in the world and that I should leave that night. So I gathered my little things and I just, took my car and drove away.
Yeah.
Without saying goodbye to anybody or anything. And it was very, very painful. And I think he thought I'd come back crawling on my knees, but I'd had one of the biggest hits in the world. to back me up.
Now, which one? Because you've had
Living
so
on a
many
Prayer.
of them.
No,
okay,
but
yeah.
all of my songs were adding up, and I had given every penny that came in to them.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I spent $1 million staying in.
Yeah.
That was what was paying for
The
everything.
beautiful house that you barely had a full room in.
Exactly. When I left, they tried to come after me, threatening me. And so I got this very tough, mob lawyer in New York to say, really? Well, guess what? We're going to sue you for brainwashing, subterfuge, fraud, like a whole litany of things.
Yeah.
You better back off.
Yeah.
And so they did, and he immediately sold the mansion, took the money, bought himself a boat. Everyone was just sent to go to hell.
Wow.
And he eventually died of AIDS himself.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
A good thing that they were all left sort of discarded, really, because...
I mean, we're still very close, like a lot of us. We stay in touch. And a lot of us, didn't recover from it. I mean, are still not right.
I can imagine.
From the damage of it. The lesson is don't follow cult leaders.
That's right, yeah. And
no matter who they are.
That's very true.
Because in the end, you'll be left completely in the dust.
The most malignant narcissists can do that in interpersonal relationships as well. And people sometimes don't even know. I'm sure it was like the frog in the frying pan for you. This thing that sounded good. There was this community of people.
Also with the overall idea that we were going to be the ones that survived and recreated society in a way that we didn't have conflicts because we had worked on ourselves and we were living in truth. And all these very high ideals, and we were sacrificing everything to save humanity.
Sure.
So when you have that in your mind, then you're capable of doing all kinds of misdeeds. Let's just look at World War II.
Right.
I think it's a human flaw. There'll be one king bee, and then everybody starts hovering around them, and they just do what they say, and into the trash heap of history.
Right. It makes it easier sometimes, even if the conditions are bad, but there's something to focus on, a mission.
That's right, because once you're working with people together, and it's not like we were having fun, laughing, a lot of jokes and fantastic dinners and music, and it was like a beautiful communal lifestyle.
Right.
I really enjoyed my time there. I mean, especially the jobs I was given. Because I'd work 4 days in New York City, then I'd go there and work hard labor for 3 days. But it was pruning trees, cultivating an organic garden, doing the raised beds, doing the mulch. I was in charge of the fireplaces, and we moved to Virginia, see.
Oh, okay.
And we lived in a Jeffersonian mansion called Monticola. It was one of these like satellite houses that coming off of Monticello, Monticola. It was on the James River. And it was stunning. You felt the history, and then it was like, yes, and then we're here with a purpose. I look back on a 3-week period where I decided not to work, and I was just working, and, doing chores, painting walls, putting, and I have to say that was one of the happiest times in my life because I didn't have to think about anything.
True.
I had no responsibilities. I had no spouse, no children, nothing but this fun group of people.
And a focus. Oh, sure, eating healthy is important to us, but it isn't always so easy to make sure you're getting all of those essential nutrients every day. Plus, different systems need different fuel. But you can make sure you're covered with the supplements available from Ritual. Ritual's Essentials contains nutrients we don't get enough of in food, and all of them in their clean, absorbable forms with no shady additives. And all of that is delivered to you in a no-nausea capsule, which is engineered to be gentle on an empty stomach. Plus, there's a mint tab in every bottle to keep things fresh. Basically, you don't get that fishy aftertaste so common with most omega-3s. Ritual's vegan-friendly, sugar-free, non-GMO, gluten-free, and allergen-free ingredients, and their sources are all clearly listed on the packaging. And most importantly, Ritual is delivered to your door. Subscribing is easy, and pausing the subscription is even easier. For only $1 a day, you get the essential nutrients your body needs, delivered every month, no strings attached. Better health doesn't happen overnight, and right now Ritual is offering Whimsically Volatile listeners 10% off during your first 3 months. Visit ritual.com/WV to start your ritual today. That's 10% off during your first 3 months at ritual.com/WV.
What I really realized when the spell broke is the true fear and emptiness that I had inside of myself. Abandonment and all of these things. And I was so lucky. I was walking down the street in New York, and I looked inside this restaurant called Coastal. It was on Amsterdam and like 81st Street. And it was a corner restaurant. And there was this very handsome young man with, it looked like Legends of the Fall, with the blonde hair to his shoulders.
Down,
to his shoulders, and these blue eyes, like piercing blue eyes.
Yeah.
And I just looked at him and I said, I want one of those. So I came back.
We'll have to see about this.
I came back with my assistant. We tried to go there to eat, but it was like 10:30 at night. And he came to the door and said, sorry, we're closed. And, I looked at him and said, okay. So we went back the next night, but this time it was at 9.
Yeah.
And he sat us down and he started eating his dinner like at a nearby table. I said, Michael Anthony was my assistant. I said, tell him to come and sit with us. And so he did. So then they were talking. And, Michael was chatting him up, and I was just like terrified because I hadn't had a relationship in so long, right? I said, get his number. So I had Michael call him the next day and ask him out on a date for me. And, and that was Curtis, my husband.
Wow. And how long was that after the spell broke and you're back living in New York full time?
That was about 3 months later or something. Maybe it was all this neediness or whatever. It just felt like love.
Yeah.
And
it still feels like love, right? I mean, it's a long time since. Yeah.
Of course. But I mean, I was like, I have to be with this person.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like love at first sight, right?
Sure.
But it was more than that. It was like a soul feeling.
Yeah.
Because I was just coming to life again.
Right. And so also your receptors and your antenna in that regard are on high alert because you've sort of closed it off for a while, or you've been...
Exactly.
Yeah.
First of all, I was so lucky because this guy was like so pure and so innocent and so good and talented and fun and funny and sexy and had everything. I don't know how I want him over because he's like so much better than me.
Better than you. I mean, like, that's a silly
he's
thing.
Handsomer. He's like, a better person, not complicated, Well,
but complication isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I think I get what you're saying. But saying someone's better than you, it's
I think he's better than me.
That's
he's
sweet.
Better than
That's
me.
sweet, I guess. Yeah.
I'm lucky that he likes me.
I'm sure he'd say the same thing about you, though.
Maybe not so much now. It's been 30 years. We just had our 30th anniversary from the first date.
Wow, congratulations.
And so from that first date, then, very soon we were living together. We moved to California together. And that was my first California thing. And
well, what was that like? What was your first California thing like?
Well, we lived in West Hollywood, and then I decided, let's make a home. And so we bought a home in Santa Monica, and it was called Casa Paloma, and it was a former Soviet embassy, consulate, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Consulate.
Yeah.
So it had very high ceilings, and had like very beautiful paintings on the ceiling, the kind of Russian style and all that. And we restored it, and it was magnificent. But after the Northridge earthquake, we said, no, we can't stay here. I mean, it scared me to death.
A lot of people had that feeling, right? Because what year was that?
I
roughly?
mean, you feel so vulnerable when the ground is shaking out from under you. I mean, it's like, wow. And the roar that you hear.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that roar is, but it feels like evil.
Yeah. And you've never heard it before since.
No,
and it's some
it's like your stomach just squeezes, and it was panic.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, you know what? Let's go. So we sold the house and we moved to Miami Beach. And we bought this gorgeous mansion, another Spanish mansion that was Spanish deco on the water. It was very inexpensive. I mean, it was like fantastic because Miami Beach still hadn't exploded.
Yeah.
I got my mom a house just around the corner.
Oh, that's sweet.
Because it was always her dreamed to live in a mansion on Miami Beach, so I bought her one.
Yeah.
And then we bought another little house, and we had 3 studios there. And then before I knew it, I had a staff of 12 people. And I bought the house across the street from that one was called Four Palms.
Yeah.
And that's where our executive offices were in my formal office. I was living like Scarface there for like, a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where I met Ricky Martin. And Ricky was a Latin artist looking to cross over. And when I got to Miami, I started getting back to my Cuban roots and started taking salsa lessons and going to Latin clubs, and decided that there needed to be a Latin sound that was combining, what I had learned doing stadium music for Bon Jovi, Kiss, and Aerosmith, and translating that into Latin sound.
Right.
And thus we came up with the World Cup theme of 1998, The Cup of Life, which is what he sang on the Grammys. It was #1 in 23 countries, like instantly.
Right.
That's where I met Draco Rosa, and he co-wrote that with me. And he was in Menudo originally.
Oh, okay.
And then he was still in Ricky's world and started producing with Casey Porter.
Because for those who don't know, Ricky Martin was a member of Menudo as well.
Yes. And they were both in Menudo, but Draco was like the cute one. Then he kind of aged out and they brought in Ricky.
Right, because Menudo, for those who don't know, it was an age limit, right?
Right.
So rotating members all the time. And what was the age limit, like 18 or something like that?
Oh, I don't even know it's that old.
Yeah, it could be 16.
They were like 16. And then, but Ricky came in, I think he was like 10, 11 years old. And he was like the little Michael Jackson of that.
Yeah.
They were a boy band.
Massive.
Yeah. So then Draco started becoming a very serious artist. And he was in a band called Maggie's Dream. And I think that Lenny Kravitz had been a lead singer in Maggie's Dream.
Oh, okay.
And so it was very, bohemian and cool, alternative, had, all these cool sounds. And then he made his own solo record called Vagabundo. And that record was just like, it was a triumph. And at the same time, he was doing these songs for Ricky. Ricky wasn't really writing with us because he was on tour.
Sure.
So we were making the music, and then Ricky would come and sing on the songs.
Yeah.
And that's how it was for Livin' La Vida Loca.
So you co-wrote Livin' La Vida Loca and She Bangs.
Shake Your Bon Bon.
All the major hits of his at the time, right?
Right. And Nobody Wants to Be Lonely.
Yeah.
With the duet with Christina Aguilera. So we had a good run.
Yeah.
It was 2 albums. I think we sold over 30 million records in 3 years.
And what was it called at the time? The Latin Explosion. There was a
Latin Music Explosion.
Latin Music Explosion.
So
that's right.
the first Latin Music Explosion, I guess, was in the 50s when Xavier Cugat and Des Yarnaz brought Latin music with Edie Gourmet. They brought Latin music to the United States and to the international market.
Sure.
Then the next Latin music explosion was Gloria Estefan. And she reinvented pop music with a Latin sound.
Right.
And so then 15 years had passed, and then Draco and I and Ricky, we reignited it.
Right.
And to such an extent that they immediately followed it with Mark Anthony, J-Lo, and on a separate rail came from Universal, because this was the Sony side, came Enrique Iglesias, and Clive Davis had Santana with Smooth.
Yeah, that's right.
So all of a sudden, from all directions came this Latin music explosion.
Yeah.
That, now 20 years later, we have a new one with Despacito.
That's right, yeah.
And, one of the fantastic things about it is that when my mother passed away in 2012, I decided to try to do something to honor her life, because she was a very hardworking person, and she was a songwriter, and she was, had cuts. She was signed to Peer Music. She was a BMI writer her entire life, but she didn't have massive success, like how she wanted. there were a lot of reasons why women were always put down and marginalized.
Sure.
And even the songs that she did get cut, we never saw a penny from them.
Oh, sure.
It was a very corrupt system.
Yeah, dodgy publishing people, etc.
All of it. Not Peer, but, like the record companies
Sure.
and all of that.
Yeah.
But I was already inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame, which I was so happy in 2008 that my mother got to come to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I introduced her from the stage, and she stood up and, she turned towards the audience. It was like she was being inducted.
I'm sure, her pride must have been just like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when she passed away in 2012, I got together, I suggested it to Hal David, who was the chairman of the Songwriters Hall of Fame.
And for those listening who aren't familiar with Hal David, one of the collaborators with Burt Bacharach and wrote all those fantastic Dionne Warwick songs. And
he had been the chairman of ASCAP many years, and he became the chairman of the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He was already in his early 90s.
Yeah.
And very much in shape. I mean, he looked fantastic. In fact, there's a movie about him called What the World Needs Now.
Oh, wow. I have to see that.
It's subtitled Lyrics by Hal David.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I just saw a screening of it. It's fantastic.
Oh, wow. I'm looking forward to that.
His collaboration with Burt. And it was three of them because Dionne Warwick was their star.
Exactly.
And what she brought to the songs, it was magic.
Yeah.
And so Hal David, who I worshipped, he kind of gave the blessing, and he said, well, you should get together with Rudy Perez, because Rudy had been asking them for 16 years, how about a Latin Songwriters Hall of Fame?
Uh-huh.
So I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So I got with Rudy, and Linda Moran, the president, said, yeah, go for it. Mm-hmm. Within 6 months, we had our first gala.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty good
and it was a disaster. It was a 4.5 long, oh my God, it took for forever. Uh-huh. The party didn't even start till midnight after the show. Now we're going into our 7th year, and it's called La Musa Awards, named after, my mom, La Musa.
Hi, I'm Pia Zadora, and I have one question for you. Are you gay? Because I just always like to know that ahead of time.
I want to go back to when you were a new artist, and I want to find out what things were like in New York for you before you got signed to Capitol. Because I think I read something about you having these brunches.
Maria Vidal and I were living in a tiny little flat, a little railroad flat. We slept in the living room in a fold-out couch that we had found in a trash heap and recovered it.
Yeah.
In fabric that we bought. Mm-hmm. I mean, it looked bad. Yeah. But it was all very clean and neat, but
Sure.
It was that couch was terrible, and you wake up every day with a backache. But Maria and I used to have brunches on Sunday. We'd have all of our friends, like Mark Shaman and
people I know his work from Hairspray,
yes,
and many, many other shows.
Zora Rasmussen, Tracy Berg. Some of them were comedians, and they'd try out their material, and we'd have 25 people all stuffed into this room, and everyone would get up and sing a song, and Mark would play, and we'd make quiche and salad and have a jug of white wine. Mm-hmm. Now, almost all the ingredients were shoplifted from the Apple food store that was on the corner. Yeah. And we had a whole way of doing it. We'd load up, we'd have this kind of travel bag, and we put it in the cart, and then we'd go up and down the aisles and fill it with a bunch of stuff and paper towels and all that. And then we'd be dropping the cheese and the ham and all the really expensive stuff. Yeah. And then we'd zip it, and then we'd go back and put the stuff away, and then we'd buy one yogurt.
With the travel bag slung over your shoulder. Yeah. Just popping in to get this. Yeah.
And so then, people would show up, and it would be this fantastic, very chic lunch
right.
that we were
sophisticated.
But I think Noel Coward said there are only two kinds of people on earth. You're either a host or you're a guest. Mm-hmm. And guests are notoriously, parasitic, and they live off the host. And the hosts are egomaniacs that have to control everything. So I guess I fall into that category, because I much prefer throwing a party than going to one.
Oh, okay, sure.
Because then everything's exactly my way.
The way you like it. Yeah.
The way I like it, and everybody has a great time.
Mm-hmm.
I love creating environments so
Sure.
you feel like you're in something that was from, Paris in the 20s or something like that.
A whole mood.
A whole mood.
Now, have you always been like that in the control aspect of things? Is it more on the fun side of things, or do you find that you struggle with control sometimes?
Other people struggle with my control. I don't struggle with it.
That's good. It's good that you're in a good spot with your control.
This year I had the honor and the dream job of a lifetime to work with Barbra Streisand.
Wow.
And she's the most extraordinary person.
Who also has been known to be kind of fond of control.
Well, it's worth it because her home's on this incredible piece of property on a cliff in Malibu is so extraordinary. The artwork, just everything about it, how it was built, every detail is fantastic.
Yeah.
And you can just feel her everywhere.
Uh-huh.
Her high taste and her intellect is extraordinary. And of course, she created a genre of music that only one person is in.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And also only one person can use that font.
Exactly. Exactly. She decided to make a record about how she was feeling about what was going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
She's very,
Politically minded, right?
Politically minded. She really is patriotic.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about an American patriot. She cares deeply about America and about our freedom. She made this record. Instead of going out and giving speeches, she decided to do it in music.
Mm-hmm.
And she made an album called Walls. Irony, right?
Yeah, right.
I had been in love with her since I first saw her in a movie called Funny Girl.
Mm-hmm.
There was a scene where she's standing on a tugboat and she's singing Don't Rain on My Parade. And that's when she turns everything around.
Mm-hmm.
She passes in front of the Statue of Liberty. And there's this image of her, and she's holding these flowers up in the air like it's the torch, and then the Statue of Liberty is behind her.
Mm-hmm.
That double image of those two strong, heroic women burned in my mind. So 50 years later, I had this vision of her, and I decided to write a song called Lady Liberty. And it's on the record, and it's a masterpiece, really. I mean, I solely wrote it, and I co-produced it with her, and she was great. And she's so prepared. Mm-hmm. And she comes in, she sings 2 or 3 takes, and it's done.
Wow.
I did put it half step higher than she was usually singing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And she was like cursing me. She says, "You're a taskmaster. I don't think I can sing this key." I said, "You can do it. I know you can do it." Because in this higher key, she was challenged. And all of a sudden, she starts singing these soaring high notes. It was like, that's it. That's the sound.
Yeah.
Like she sang in People.
Sure.
Or like, Papa, Can You Hear Me? Mm-hmm. That's what I wanted to hear. Mm-hmm. And she did it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like goosebumps. She says, "You're a taskmaster. You're a slave driver." So when I went to say goodbye to her, she gave me this big hug, and she looked up at me and she said, "You're a pain in the ass, and I commend you." So I'm going to have that carved on my tombstone.
That's a good one, I think.
With her quote.
Mm-hmm. Attributed to, of course.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Paul Stanley because he saw you and Rouge playing.
As Paul Stanley says it, he had been walking in the village in New York City, in Greenwich Village, and he saw posters of us all over.
Yeah.
And he kept seeing multiple different posters of us playing little clubs. So he was intrigued by my look and also these gorgeous girls around me.
You guys had this great glam look.
As he would say, there was something androgynous, about the way I looked and that he thought was intriguing. So he came to see us perform at a place called Tracks on 72nd Street. And it was like this underground club. He hung out with us and we made friends. And then he said, "Hey, why don't we try writing a song together?" I didn't know anything about Kiss. I thought it was for like little kids and stuff. The first song we wrote was I Was Made for Loving You.
Their biggest hit, right? Their biggest single hit.
That's right. And with that song, I was kind of bringing in my sound into it because I was really, into mechanical drums and kind of disco sounds. It's the very beginning of drum machines.
Sure.
and putting power guitars onto dance beats.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite combinations, incidentally. Yeah.
And I think we were the first to do it.
Yeah.
And it just exploded all over the world. And Gene hated it. I mean, he just thought it was the cheesiest, the worst. Like I had brought, Kiss down to the lowest level. And to this day, it's the biggest international hit that Kiss has ever had.
Yeah.
It's one of those songs in the show that is spectacular. Oh, there was one time where they made an album called The Elder with Bob Ezrin.
Yeah.
And they decided, instead of being like Bon Jovi and Aerosmith using Desmond Child, co-writing the songs, they said, we don't need Desmond Child. In fact, we're putting guards on the door to keep Desmond Child out of the studio. Gene kept saying that, in hundreds of interviews. And I finally called Paul up. I said, why are you picking on your ally?
Yeah.
Instead of like somebody who hates you,
Right.
And he said, oh, that's just Gene. Gene. I said, no, it really hurts my feelings.
Yeah.
And I feel it's like very ungrateful, for, what I've contributed to the success of Kiss.
Yeah.
And he said, no, don't pay any attention, all this. So I went out, and when I came back on the answering machine, there was this. Hi, it's Gene. Sorry. Click. He hangs up. 3 words or 4 words. Hi, it's Gene. Sorry. Click.
An economy of speech.
But then I was at the Beverly Hills Hotel downstairs in the little cafe that I used to love going to.
Mm-hmm. Well, now we can't. Yeah, you can't go there. Yeah.
But I was there having breakfast. There was no one there, and I was kind of looking at I think I was reading the New York Times, and suddenly I feel a funny feeling, like something was kind of creepy was touching, my ass, and it was like, what is this? And I looked, and I didn't see anything. He had crawled into the restaurant, Gene, under my stool, and had reached over and started squeezing my ass. Then he sat next to me and we talked, and we made friends, and he was very helpful. Had suggested an attorney. His name is Bob Lang, who had been working with him on his series called Family Jewels.
Oh, right.
Then introduced me to Leslie Greif, and who was the producer of that, and we're working together on stuff, and like so many good things came out of Gene's introduction. I went to see him with my sons last month. They came through with their farewell tour, and it was the most spectacular Kiss tour ever. Backstage, my sons are standing there, and they had their friends with them, and Paul came to say hello to us, and this was before the show, and all in full makeup and everything, 8 feet tall. And he gave me this big hug, and he looked at me and he said, I'm here because of you.
That's beautiful.
This tour, though, the farewell tour, takes the cake. I don't think I've ever seen a more entertaining show ever. And Paul, he looks incredible. And his body, his arms, it's like he just, like Benjamin Buttons. He looks better than ever and singing better than ever.
And his book is really a terrifically inspiring story. We talked about Aerosmith briefly. You were responsible for a major rock band in the mid-'80s having a song basically about sexual fluidity. Because Dude Looks Like a Lady is about what?
Well, it happened like this. I was forced on Aerosmith by their A&R guy, legendary John Claudner.
Yeah.
And they did not want to write with me, and they didn't want to write with any outside writers because they never had, and they didn't think that they needed it. And there was also this kind of purity that they were kind of holding on to. But they agreed. And so they flew me to Boston. Limo's waiting for me and takes me to this warehouse where they had set up a huge stage setup. Hundreds of guitars. I mean, rows upon rows, like an army of guitars, like a regiment of guitars. Every color, every sparkle, zebra, leopard, black, white, silver, gold, every kind of guitar. Steven comes and greets me, and he said, "Hey, come over here. Come and listen to this. I want to see what you think of this." They were playing this backwards guitar loop that went da-da, 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 da-da.
Yeah.
And then he says, "What do you think of this? Cruising for the ladies, da-da, da-da, cruising for the ladies." And then he like stood back and looked at me like with a big smile on his face. And I said, "I think that's really bad." I think that's my first words to Aerosmith.
Perfect.
That's really bad. I mean, even Van Halen wouldn't have that on the B-side of their worst record. I mean, it's so tired, you know.
Yeah.
You know, like driving down Sunset Strip,
Right, yeah.
you know, cruising for the ladies. You can just see the, you know, like
you can see the whole picture, right?
the Van Halen video with the pink Cadillac, you know, convertible and babes everywhere.
Sure.
You know, just like looking at me with arms crossed. And then Steven, who's a people pleaser, he says, "Well," you know, kind of sheepishly, he said, "When I first started singing that riff, I was singing 'Dude Looks Like a Lady.'" And I said, "What? Dude Looks Like a Lady?" And I said, "That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's fantastic." And Joe said, "Yeah, but we don't know what that means." I said, "Okay, I know what that means."
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I kind of hoodwinked them into this storyline. And so the reason he started singing "Dude Looks Like a Lady" was because the band and the roadies had all gone to this bar on the shore.
Yeah.
Kind of like a suicide bar, like last drink before you kill yourself. And at the end of the bar was this, you know, they saw this gorgeous platinum mullet.
Yeah.
You know, with midriff and, you know, black nails and, you know, all this jewelry and, you know, looking very like curvy and gorgeous. And they were like kind of drawing straws on who's going to go up and say hello. She's the only woman in the whole bar. And she turns around on the stool and looks at them, and it's Vince Neil from Motley Crue.
Yeah, right.
And then they were like, "Ooh, that dude looks like a lady. Dude looks like a lady. Dude looks like a lady." And that's where it was born.
Yeah.
So I hoodwinked them. I took that storyline and I said, "Well, how about this story? You know, a dude walks into a bar, you know, cruised into a bar on the shore. Her picture graced the grime on the door."
Yeah.
They got into it, and that song broke them. You know,
the comeback.
It was the comeback song.
Yeah.
And John Clodner was in the video with the long beard, looking very kind of Duck Dynasty, but it was like Jewish Duck Dynasty. Schmuck Dynasty.
And John Clodner played a large role in your 80s career, yeah?
Exactly, because he loved the songs I did with Bon Jovi. So he hired me to produce Cher,
right?
Who hadn't had a record in 8 years. And everyone was thinking, you know, "Oh, she's just a Vegas act. She you know, she's washed up. She's like Joey Heatherton or something," right?
Yeah.
David Geffen adored her.
Yeah.
And
dated her briefly, right?
Mm-hmm.
He dated her. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, they're like me, like we fall in love with women even though we're gay, whatever.
Some women are just irresistible.
Yeah. Never judge a book by its cover.
Right. And to get back to that really quickly, one of the great things about the lyric is that the guy discovers it's a man, and okay, well, you know what? He's still into this.
Sticks with it.
Yeah.
He says, "My funky lady, I like it like that."
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's one of the great things, because he doesn't run away.
Right.
He goes, "Well, you know what? I like what it looks like on the outside, so I'm into it."
Yeah.
And that was a huge barrier to cross.
Sure, certainly.
And they put it in Mrs. Doubtfire, and in the scene, Mrs. Doubtfire is in the park and dancing with a broom.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, every like 4 or 5 year old kid in the world knows that song and sings it.
Yeah.
Knows the words.
Exactly. And the message gets in.
Never judge a book by its cover.
Exactly.
And it has a beautiful message.
It does. Back to John Clodner. Yeah, so one of John Clodner's great gifts is looking at an artist who maybe isn't working with who they should be working with right now, and then putting them with the person that's going to let them be the best version of themselves.
I think John Clodner is a visionary.
Yeah.
And he also has tremendous integrity. I owe him so much. And a few years ago, I saw him at Le Pain Quotidien on Melrose.
Uh-huh.
And he was sitting outside, and he was wearing one of his brightly colored Hawaiian shirts, and he was sitting there, and I said, oh my God, there's John Clodner. And I just walked up to the table, I leaned over, and I looked at him. He looked at me, and I said, thank you. And I just walked away. No chit-chat, no
just
nothing.
Thank you, yeah.
Just thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I bet a lot of people don't say thank you to him.
I think that's true. The kind of work that he did for artists like Aerosmith, Whitesnake, etc., sometimes some performers' egos would prefer to not imagine that other people had that kind of influence on that stuff. I bet you must have dealt with that a little bit, right? As some of the acts that you've worked with try to downplay your contribution to things?
I think the critics did that to them because since the Dylan days and the Beatles and people started writing their own music, it was a no-no to use outside writers or even do an outside song.
Yeah.
And so there was a stigma.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, you know, when different bands would do their interviews and all of that, they wouldn't mention me until the interviewer brought it up. And then they kind of, oh yeah, he's a song doctor. He like fixed a couple songs, or he only wrote a couple of words. And I'll tell you a funny story. Steven Tyler put out an autobiography.
Yeah.
And Joe Perry put out one, co-written with David Ritz, the same person who's co-written my autobiography that'll be out next year.
Oh, great.
Steven goes on for pages on end about how I came in and I looked like Juan Valdez, you know, and that I had a mustache, which I've never had like a mustache, you know, like on its own.
Right.
Like
right.
not even in the 70s.
Yeah. Like prime time of any to have one. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he made me sound like I was like Juan Valdez in a donkey. And he said, oh yeah, he came in here. He wrote a couple words here and there, but you know, the song had already been written. You know, he mentions nothing about cruising for the ladies.
Yes, right. He leaves
nothing
that part
about
out.
me like arm twisting them into the storyline.
Yeah.
And nothing about, you know, the alliteration that I brought to the song in the lyrics, you know, her picture graced the grime on the door, which is pure Bob Crew, who was one of my mentors.
And Bob Crew, of course, wrote so many fabulous hits for the Four Seasons.
Yeah, and wrote Lady Marmalade.
Exactly,
Voulez-vous coucher avec moi, ce soir.
And he was a big stickler for exact rhymes,
Exact
right?
rhymes and rhyming and alliteration.
Okay.
And a contrast of opposites. That's who I learned everything from. I spent 2 years writing songs with him. I wrote 38 songs with him.
And this is after you'd had the Desmond Child and Rouge albums already.
He was my producer, but he really was my professor.
Sure.
And it was very strict songwriting, like Brill Building style.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Now, it's interesting, too. A lot of times people get a deal, they think they don't have anything to learn. But you thought, you know what, maybe I could pick up a few things here.
Oh, I was desperate. I was so lost. And I was looking for a father figure, too. So it worked out. And he was gay, and he only worked with me because I'm a Scorpio as well.
Really?
Yeah, and that's the only reason he worked with Bob Gaudio.
So for those who don't know, also a major player in the Four Seasons.
Yes, was one of the singers, and he co-wrote all those songs with Bob.
Yeah.
And he was a Scorpio as well, so he taught me everything. So Steven, you know, writes this like pages on the making of Dude Looks Like a Lady. I mean, diminishing me like entirely. Then Joe comes out with his book and says, I had come up with the title. That, you know, and it's like, that wasn't true either.
Yeah.
I didn't come up with the title. Steven did.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, it was so crazy.
Yeah.
So now I'm writing my autobiography where I'm going to set the record straight. And it's like, okay, who are you going to believe? 2 rehab rejects or me?
They might have had a little bit of foggy memories, right? Or the guy who is very exact about things.
A couple of years ago, Steven was making his country record, and he picked a song that was written by my artist Levi Humman called Red, White, and You. So we were working, and then I was telling the story of Dude Looks Like a Lady. You know, he listened to my story, and he goes, oh, right. I think I like your story better than mine. I said, Jesus Christ.
No, you know, it's interesting. Earlier you said that Steven's a people pleaser, and I'm curious if you have done a lot of therapy, because it sounds like you've quested for spiritual sustenance and connection with people throughout your life. In the documentary, too, the story of Roman and Nero, which tells the story of how you and your husband decided to have a child through surrogacy and ended up having twins. You talk in there a little bit about going to India, and Curtis mentions that the two of you have always sort of been interested in either becoming more spiritual or finding more spiritual things in life.
That's right. I've always been a seeker. I mean, since I was 14 years old, I was, studying the Rosicrucian, New Age this and yogi that, and vegetarian this, and like this is like the 60s.
Yeah.
When I was 14. So this is 1964. No, wait, 66.
Okay.
67.
Yeah.
And I was wearing beads and sandals and stuff.
Right. So we only have a few more minutes, so I want to hit a couple other artists that you've worked with. Joan Jett, of course, with I Hate Myself for Loving You.
I got a call from Kenny Laguna, who is Joan Jett's manager and partner, and not romantic partner, but like their business partners.
Yeah. And there's a new documentary on Joan Jett, which really shows that relationship.
I mean,
beautifully.
They're fantastic. And she hadn't really had a pop hit since I Love Rock and Roll. And so I'd been having all these hits with rockers. So he said, why don't you try writing a song with Joni? And she is such a beautiful woman, but like so masculine and boyish.
Yeah.
So I think I fell in love with the boy in her. And I was just mesmerized. She was like the female Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
Her lips and smile and her, kind of bedroom eyes and just everything about her stunning. I had, again, this title in my mind, the title that had contrasting opposites. I Hate Myself for Loving You. And she didn't want to sing a song with the word love in it again. She said, I don't sing love anymore. And I said, no, but listen, just give this a chance. And so Kenny worked so hard to get that song promoted. He went to Morris Levy and, kissed his ring. And
Morris Levy, for those who don't know, look him up because it's quite a fascinating story.
Yeah. So he was, controlled a lot of radio. And, he loved Kenny because, Kenny had been an old timer and he was in Jay and the Americans, and
didn't he write "Yummy, Yummy, Yummy"? They got love in my tummy. Yeah.
And so to this day, it's like one of the most known songs. And for a long time, it was the theme for. First, it was Monday Night Football, then it became Sunday Night Football.
Right.
I think Pink sang it, Faith Hill sang it, Carrie Underwood, I think, sang it, and everybody sang that melody to lyrics that were written for the football.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. Everybody knows that song. And I'm so proud to have, co-written it with her.
Yeah.
In fact, when I went to make the record, I produced it. I played it, the rough of it for John Bon Jovi. And he just looked at me and said, fuck you. And he walked away. I think that meant he liked it.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Sounds like it's a thumbs up from John.
Fuck you.
Well, before we close things out, is there anything you'd like to add or anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to bring up?
I'd love people to follow me on Instagram because I'm hooked on it.
Yeah?
I'm so on that Instagram. I don't even know how to open my Facebook or Twitter.
You don't need to open Facebook anymore.
No, but I'm on Facebook and Twitter, but the Instagram, I'm hooked. That's the
thing, yeah.
I am hooked because late at night, I just keep going and going and going and looking at all these things. I mean, and then you follow one person and you follow another one.
Yeah.
You can endless. It's
like
endless.
Yeah, it's like the YouTube wormholes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly putting stuff in.
Yeah.
So I'm at Desmond.child. I'm looking for true followers that will never leave me.
Right. You mentioned the abandonment thing before. So look, it holds true. We have this thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And I look for my television special. It's on a program called The Kate.
The Kate?
Kate on PBS, coming to a public television station near you. September 13th. It's a Friday, September 13th. My live album comes out.
Oh, congratulations. Wait, and this is from the 54 Four Below shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm looking
and
forward
then
to that.
It's the 40th anniversary of our two Desmond Child and Rouge albums. and we're re-releasing them remastered
fabulous.
on BMG Records. And we're going to be dropping new music as Desmond Child.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to be dropping new music as Desmond Child.
I'm very excited as a Desmond Child fan. I'm really looking forward to this
and the
flood
first
of new
single,
material. Yeah.
You know how like Zed has featuring and all this kind of stuff. Well, I actually am singing on my first single. I'm not going to tell the title yet.
Okay.
But Alice Cooper's going to sing on it.
That's fantastic. Well, I can't wait. And we all know titles are a big thing to you. Without the title, you don't start writing the song, right?
That's right. But, I'm going to be 66 in October. And I think something clicked in me. It's like I had been a studio rat for so long. And I just said, I love singing.
Yeah.
And I don't care if, I make a dime. I just love to get up and sing. So I'm going to be going around and singing with my show. And I've gotten amazing reviews. And hopefully take it all around the world. And then I'll have my autobiography out. And I have a Broadway show I'm working on called Cuba Libre. And it's a true story of my family before and after the Cuban Revolution. And I'm working on a movie.
Oh, wow.
About the Lou Pearlman story.
Ooh, wow. That's a
And so
deep story.
I'm getting close to signing a deal with a big Hollywood production house to make it. And I've been working on it for a long time with my partner on that, Andreas Carlson. And we conceived this in 1998, so it's been like over 20 years that we've been working on this idea. And the story just got better and better and better and better. And Lou Pearlman went to jail, and then he dies in jail.
Right.
And so we're working on the scripted version of that story because there's a fantastic documentary on YouTube out that Lance Bass did. Yeah. So I just love the fact that, at this point in my life, I'm taking a little bit seriously. So I'm actually making deals and making things happen in all directions, and I'm not saying no to anything.
Well, I'm looking forward to all of that. And Desmond, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
yes, yes, you know it is, yes, yes.